Welcome everyone, this is Alejandro Feijes speaking. I'm one of the global directors for the international coaching community. I welcome you today to this new edition of ICC webinars where we are going to share from the hand of Joseph O'Connor, one of the co-founders of the international coaching community, um, a really interesting webinar about team coaching as the way forward for businesses. So we are really grateful for your presence today. For many of you, it's in the middle of the day, so many thanks for taking the time to be with us. Um, and well, we think that this topic is really interesting for organizations nowadays, as more and more team coaches are demanded on the market of coaching, and and we are offering this webinar also under the frame of the next team coaching certification course that will be happening in August in Santiago de Chile from 23 to 28. So this would be a nice approach to that moment too. So I think it's time that we can welcome Joseph now, and so we can start with today's session. So Joseph, many thanks for being with us today and holding this webinar.
Thanks, Alessandro, and welcome to everybody. Some familiar faces or familiar names and some not so familiar, so I hope that I'll meet many of you when I come to Chile in August. So it's a lovely evening here in London, and I hope a very nice afternoon in wherever you are. I have a great interest in team coaching. As you probably know, I work mostly as an executive coach, but of course team coaching is more and more important now in business. And you could, of course, there are also executive teams. So I just want to tell you a little bit about the ICC approach to team coaching. It's unique. The team coaching methodology that we have elaborated is not taught anywhere else. It's really world class. So I'll tell you a little bit about that, show you some tools, and after about 3/4 of an hour or so, depending on how much I talk, no more than an hour certainly, then there'll be a space for comments and questions. So team coaching, world-class team coaching. So what is team coaching anyway? Well, it's helping the team, certainly, as a team coach, improve their performance and their processes through reflection, action, and dialogue. So there's 5 really important ideas there. One is performance. So there needs to be something happening. There's got to be a difference in the team. The performance will improve. So there will be tangible, measurable results. That's the first thing. Second thing is that in order to do that, the process will improve, because the results and performance are dependent on the processes that you use. You have a bad process, you get a bad result. So performance and process through 3 important things that, of course, as coaches you'll be very familiar with. One is reflection, so looking on what you do and reflecting on it, thinking about it. Action, of course, coaching is all about taking action. And dialogue as talk between people, dialogue between coach and team, dialogue within the team. So already we can see that it's quite different from individual coaching, because although individual clients might talk to themselves, it's not the same as a number of very different people talking together and generating ideas in a team. So that's a reasonable definition of team coaching. So why should we bother with team coaching? Well, more and more the business unit to create, generate, and implement business results is a team. It's not individuals anymore. So there are many, many businesses using teams, and there are many, many businesses wanting to use teams, and many, many businesses who don't know how to use teams but would like to use teams. So people are expected to be good team members, but they're not told how to. So this is a huge opportunity for team coaching. I would say that it's even bigger opportunity in team coaching than individual coaching, because teams are seen as so important in business, and there is a much, much smaller number of qualified team coaches than there are of qualified individual coaches. So it's a great business opportunity. There's not very much team coaching training out there, and not very much expertise in team coaching. So as a team coach, what are you selling? What are you selling to the business? Well, more effective teams, so teams that do things better, they get better results, and they're more efficient. And that means either doing something quicker or with more economical use of resources. There's development of coaching skills in the organization as well, because when you coach a team, you'll be using those coaching skills. Those coaching skills will spread out from the team, because the team will take them in, use them inside their own team, of course, but they'll also go outside the team, because it will have impact. A team coach is going to reduce conflicts in a team. Teams are full of human beings, and human beings have conflicts, some big and some small. You're always going to get some conflict. Conflict isn't necessarily a bad thing, but if you can deal with it quickly at the time and don't let it carry on and kind of go bad with people getting upset and not talking about it, this can make a team very effective and a very unpleasant place to work, and you certainly don't want that. The team coach doesn't have to be the manager or the team leader. So team members are more likely to be open about their problems, so that these problems can be solved early. They're more likely to be open about their concerns. They're more likely to have a good dialogue and an open dialogue with a team coach. Team coaching will help to build a culture of collaboration and working together, because a lot of problems in business are caused what's called in English by a silo mentality. And a silo mentality means that people or departments sit inside their own little place, and they don't want to work with people outside that, because people outside that disturb them, and everybody tries to do their own thing within their own department, and there's no cooperation or collaboration between departments. And team coaching breaks that down, which makes a business much more effective. Teams get more creative, they get better results, and they're more able to solve problems themselves. At the start, the teams don't know how to solve problems. Team coach needs to help them, but once they see how the process works, then they get very good at it. Whoops, hold on, we've gone too fast too soon. Effective teams will help with knowledge management, and that's extremely important in business now. Business creates enormous amount of knowledge, and that knowledge is often isolated in the heads or the filing cabinets of individuals. So teams help in knowledge management. It helps to get knowledge spread out across the business where it's needed. Effective teams help succession planning. They help to retain employees, valued employees, because employees like to work in good teams where they're happy with other people. And customer relations teams will be better as well. They'll have better relationship with customers. This will help sales. The whole thing is very synergistic. So there's a lot of reasons why team coaching is really important right now. Can easily be sold into business very often more easily than individual coaching. So how do you do team coaching? Well, I'll tell you a little bit right now, but to get the full story you need to do the training, of course. And I'd like to give you some ideas. I'd like you to, at the end of this, to have a couple of tools you can use anyway and be motivated to know more about it. So moving on then, you briefly saw that scary monster there. So what is a team? It's not a big person because some people think that coaching a team is like coaching a very complicated person, and you can apply the same coaching skills as you use for individuals with teams. Well, you can't. You still need the basic coaching methodology of asking questions and taking action, the reflection and the action, and the questions, values, of course, goals, but it's different. It's different for teams. And of course it's different for teams because there's just more people. And as you know, one person can be complicated enough, but when you get 2 or 3 or 4 people, it doesn't just make it 2 or 3 or 4 times more complicated. It makes it hundreds of times more complicated because they all play off each other. And in team coaching, you want them to play off each other in the best and most creative way. So if a team isn't a big person, then what is it? It's a small number. I don't think teams really work very well with more than about 9. I think once teams get into double figures, they're quite difficult to handle, and they tend to break down into smaller units. So I would say the most effective teams usually are going to be under 10. They have complementary skills. In other words, they don't all have the same skills because that would be boring. They just replicate each other's work. It's exactly like a good football team. You don't have 11 world-class goalkeepers. You don't have 11 world-class goal scorers because both those teams would lose to another team that had a balance of different people and different talents. So the skills need to go together, complementary. They're committed to a common purpose, and this is one of the most important things. They have a common goal. Performance goals, which is the steps towards the common goal, and the approach, which is the way that they tackle that, and that includes the values, and for which they hold themselves mutually accountable. In other words, they are committed, they are responsible, they hold each other and themselves accountable for achieving the goals that they've agreed to. So that's a team, or a reasonably good definition of a team. And a team is a system. So a system is complex. A system has relationships. A system is a verb. In other words, it's a group that does something, and it has to keep doing something in order to function. So that's what I mean when I say a system is a verb. A system's got to continue to do something. It has interconnections, it has a purpose, it is complex, but not necessarily complicated. So there's a lot of possibilities in a team, but with some simple principles, especially systems principles, you can understand teams. Sorry. So, types of teams. Well, we have different sorts of teams. We have leadership teams, so that would be groups of executives, board of directors, vice presidents, high teams that need to elaborate policy together in order to run the organization. You have departmental teams, teams that work together in a department. You have middle management teams. You have creative teams, teams that are brought together to create certain either ideas or new ways of selling or new products. I worked with many teams in banking which were creative teams, and they had to create new financial products. And of course action teams that actually go do something. So those are some of the different sorts of teams. And there's also virtual teams. Those have different issues. Virtual teams may not meet each other in the flesh. They can be in different continents, certainly different cities, and they need to be coordinated. And also they need to work together just like a team. This makes it much more difficult in some ways because you have elements of technology and coordination to deal with, but a little bit easier in other ways because you don't get the face-to-face kinds of conflicts that you might get. And virtual teams tend to be more task-oriented. You know, they get together to do a task. You can't have very much of a strong relationship with other team members if you're in a different city. So that's why virtual teams can work very well together as long as they stay task-oriented and as long as you ask them to do some clear-cut tasks and don't try to get them to do messy tasks that need some kind of relationship and a lot of coordination to go together. So here's some other ways to think about teams. You can have teams that have an unstable relationship, which means that the members keep changing. Or you can have teams with a stable relationship, where the teams stay the same. So unstable membership of a team would be like a cabin crew on an aircraft. So every time it's different. You know, you don't get the same cabin crew. People will work with all different sorts of people for every flight, but they all know their job and they all do the same thing. So cabin crew is very unstable membership, but they still need to work as a team, very much so. This is a life and death team sometimes. And on the other hand, you can have stable membership. You can have membership which doesn't change. So boards of directors, usually the higher leadership of companies, will have a pretty stable membership. Committees. And these two different sorts of teams can have changing tasks. They can be doing different things all the time. Different meetings, different sorts of challenges, different kinds of creative ways of doing things, different kinds of things that they work, different products that they do. Or you can have teams that have unchanging tasks. They do the same thing. They do the same thing every time. So the cabin crew would be an example of unstable membership, but stable tasks, the same unchanging tasks. They do the same thing every time, even though the people are different. And you can have teams that are the same, but they do different things every time, like a SWAT team, for example. So you can characterize teams not just by where they are in the organization, but also by the kinds of things that they do, the kind of processes that they run. So then what does a team coach do? Well, a team coach has a very special place because a team coach is part of the team in a way that a coach is not. A team coach has a relationship with a team that an individual coach does not have the same sort of relationship with an individual client. And yet, they are also apart. So they have this strange relationship of being inside the team, but also outside the team. It's a bit like two circles, and they overlap. And where they overlap, this is where the team coaching goes on. And the reason for this slide is it's a little story that you may have heard. It's a Sufi story about a holy man in the desert who's riding on his camel. You can see him on the left there. And he rides into a village, and he sees people arguing like crazy. In particular, 3 people are arguing, and everybody in the village is getting drawn in on one side or the other. So he comes in and he gets off his camel and he says, "Look, can I help you? I'm a coach." And well, the 3 people in the middle of the argument, they tell him what's happened. They say that they're sons. There's an eldest son, a middle son, and a youngest son. And the father has died, and he's left the wealth of the family to the 3 sons. The only trouble is the wealth of the family consists of 17 camels. That is their total wealth. And he said that the eldest son could have half of the wealth, the middle son could have a third of the wealth, and the youngest son should have a 1/9 of the wealth. And they're arguing because it's impossible. They've got 17 camels. If the eldest son took half of the wealth, he would take 8.5 camels. And of course, half a camel isn't much good to anyone. It's one dead camel, really, isn't it? So they're not going to kill the camels. That would be ridiculous. So they don't know what to do. They're stuck. They can't divide 17 camels like that. So the holy man says, "Okay, well, let me see if I can help you. Why don't I give you my camel? There, I give it to you for nothing. It's yours, okay? And now you have 18 camels." So the sons look at him and say, "Yes, okay." And then the holy man says, "Well, so the eldest son is due 1/2 of the wealth. So you've got 18 camels now. So 1/2 of that is 9. So there you go, 9 camels for you." So the eldest son says, "Great, thank you very much." And the middle son, he turns to the middle son and says, "Well, you're supposed to have a third, 1/3 of the wealth. Well, 1/3 of 18 is 6. So 6 camels for you." "Well, thank you very much," says the middle son. "That's great." And then he turns to the youngest son and he says, "Well, you're due 1/9 part of the wealth. And with 18 camels, 1/9 part is 2 camels. So why don't you take 2 camels?" "Well, thank you very much," says the youngest son. And so the eldest has 9, the middle has 6, and the youngest has 2. And that makes 17. And the holy man's camel is left. So he takes it back and he rides out and everybody stopped fighting. So it's a little mathematical trick, but I think it's a nice metaphor for a coach, because a coach kind of comes into the team, they give whatever they have to the team, and yet they don't leave anything. It's not like they make a big impression on the team. They're not taken into the team. They can be a part and move on at any stage. So the coach has to coach a group of individuals into synergy and a common goal, has to coach the team to work together to achieve the goal in the most efficient and effective way, has to coach the team through the conflicts that occur when the different people work together, and he has to coach the team, this is the good part, through their celebration when they achieve the goal. And sometimes teams then will, will break up and go their different ways, maybe form other teams. But there's 4 stages. That kind of starting up, there's the place where they're getting together, there's possible conflict, and then there's high performance leading to achievement. So the coach is the guardian of the values, the guardian of the goal that keeps them on track. So, what's important in team coaching? What sort of things should we be covering? Well, we've talked a little bit about the position of the team coach. He's kind of not quite in and not quite out, but is able to kind of move freely between those two and get the best of both. He's the guardian of the team goal. He helps the team set the goal and achieve it, of course, and also all the different little step goals that they need to get in order to get that goal at the end. He helps the team with their values. He helps them through possible obstructions, and he helps them manage their resources. And one way that he does that is through this little tool here, which is a very interesting one called the goal grid. We used to do this model, this tool, in the first coaching course, but we found that it's fitted much better into the team coaching course. So this is where we do it in the team coaching course, and we can do it in very much more detail and very much deeper than in the first coaching course. And the idea of the goal grid is very simple. It helps teams to articulate their goal, and it also helps them with the ecology of their goal. In other words, fitting their goal into the bigger system. So when you think about goals, first of all, there are things that you want, and there are things that you don't want. So that's at the top there. There are things that you have, and there are things that you do not have, and that's along the left-hand side. So then we have a little grid here where things that you want and the things that you have, which is the top left square, those are the things that you want to keep. So those are your resources. These are your strengths. So it's important to focus on those, to use those, and to know what those are. Now, there are also things that you want, but you don't have. So this is the bottom left square, and this is what you want to achieve. This is your goal. You want it, you don't have it, so this is where you set your goals, and also the resources that you want to help you achieve the goal, which you don't have yet. So that's an important box. And basically the team is going to fill these boxes in with the various elements that they have as part of their business. If we move across to the right-hand side, there are things that you do not want, but you have. So that's the top right corner. So you've got them, but you don't want them. These are the things you want to eliminate. These are the things that you want to get rid of. These are the stones in your backpack that weigh you down. And they can be all sorts of things. And some of the most difficult things to get rid of here are limiting ideas. Those can weigh down on the team, they can weigh down individual members of the team, and they can make team working very difficult to achieve. So that's an important box to address. What do you need to get rid of? And then the last box there at the bottom right, there are some things that you do not want, and there are some things that you do not have, and you want to avoid them. So this is risk management, this is risk assessment. These are things that you want to stay clear of. They're the pitfalls on the way. And there's nothing wrong in this kind of risk management or looking out for pitfalls. It's not negative, it's not bad. In fact, it's very important. It's a very important part of any kind of planning that you need to do in order to achieve a business goal. So those are 4 quadrants, 4 boxes that we use here, and we help the teams to fill them up, and we see what's in them, and we see how the things that are in them relate to each other, because it's all a system. And then we find a leverage point, a point where they can take action, which will be identified by looking at this goal grid with the help of the coach. So it's an extremely interesting tool to use with teams. Sometimes teams will agree with what goes in each box, and sometimes teams won't agree with what goes in each box. And both of those are fine. They both lead to a very important discussion about what the goal is, how they think about it, what they want to keep, what they want to get rid of, what they want to achieve, and what they want to avoid. So that's one tool that we use for particularly with the goal with teams. So what else are we talking about in team coaching? Well, stages of development of a team. Teams go through certain stages, and it's important that the coach keeps track of those and knows where the team is in the stages, because you need to coach teams at the right stage. If you don't understand the stage of the team, you may do something in your coaching that won't be appropriate for the team at that stage. You know, and the obvious example here is a team that is just starting up. You can't treat them like they've been together for a long time and they're a high-performance team, because they're not. And if you treat them like that, they won't understand, they won't be able to get the groundwork done that will make them into a good team later on, and it's not going to work. So you absolutely need to understand the stages of development of the teams and how to coach each different stage. Creativity is very important in teamwork. It's highly valued by businesses, so coaches help teams to be creative. They help teams to balance between task and relationship. We talked a little bit about that with virtual teams. Some teams are very task-oriented. Some teams are very task-oriented. This isn't behaving today. And some teams are very relationship-oriented, and both of them have their problems, and both of them have their strengths. And you need to be able to deal with both. There are questions about an internal or an external team coach. An internal team coach is someone inside the business who takes the role of the team coach. The external team coach is someone coming in from outside the business who takes the role of the team coach. Just like individual coaching. You can have internal or external team coaches, just like you can have internal or external individual coaches, but they both need to work slightly differently. And then, of course, helping the team into high performance. Very important. And then this little slide that kept coming up here. Of course, there will be conflict. It's part of the stages of development, and the coach needs to be able to deal with that. And there are very clear and very good models that we use to help a coach deal with teams who are in conflict or coming up towards conflict, so that, of course, it's much better to head off a conflict than it is for it to erupt and lead to bad feeling. And sometimes, of course, a coach may deliberately provoke a small conflict, not like a fight or anything, but just a difference of ideas to help to clarify. Just like, you know, sharpening. To sharpen a knife, you've got to rub it against something else that's hard. So when people rub together, they get sharper. They get sharper intellectually. They get sharper as team members. So that's an important part of team coaching. There's one other interesting part of team coaching that's much more elaborate than individual coaching, and that's the use of emotional space, what I call. So you can see in the little picture here that there's 3 people in the same emotional space and one person is separated. And because he's separated in space, he will be separated in feeling and emotion in some kind of way as well. So you take half a dozen individuals and you put them in a room together and let them find their place. You will see some very interesting ways that they space themselves out. You can see this anyway if you go into a waiting room. You know, come into a waiting room, one person sits down, 2 other people come in, they sit in a certain place. then another couple of people come in, they sit in another place, they space themselves out. And we do this without even thinking about it. It's very important. So psychogeography is something that a coach needs to be aware of, because it will tell the coach things about the team, how they dispose themselves in space. Even before the team has said a single word, you can tell a lot about how a team is working and who's in and who's out and who gets on and who doesn't, just by looking at how they're sitting down and how they've spaced themselves out. And you can use psychogeography as a coach to space them out in a better way, which will help them to relate to each other better. I think this is very interesting. And in fact, it's going to be the subject of my next book, which will be coming out shortly, on emotional space, especially around coaching and teams. So it's something we go into some detail in the team coaching. You may know that there's individual space as well. As human beings, we mark out our individual space. There's the space that's closest to us. It's called an intimate space. This is from research that goes back 30, 40 years, starting with an anthropologist called Edward T. Hall. And that intimate space you only let certain people into. It's close to you. You do not want somebody stepping into that unless they're invited. Then you have the personal space, which you'll see people chatting with other people. And then you'll have the social space where, you know, people just are in the same room or they're okay together. And of course, it varies by individual. It also varies by culture. In Europe and United States, these are rather larger, these spaces, than they are in Latin American cultures. So generally speaking, in Latin American cultures, people stand closer, the personal space is closer, the social space is closer. In Europe, people are not so comfortable if you stand so close to them. So it varies, and this is another example of psychogeography or emotional space. So you can tell a lot about a team from their use of emotional space. You can tell a lot about it. You can help the team a lot by rearranging their emotional space, and as a coach you can pick the best place to sit. People think that you just go in as a coach and you sit down somewhere, anywhere, and then you start coaching the team. No, it doesn't work like that. You have to pick your place very carefully. So, finally, what's the object of all this? It's to create a great high-performing team. That's the whole point. That's what it's all down to. And a high-performing team is one that works together. They enjoy their work together. They like to work together. They're creative together. And they get great results very efficiently. This is the dream team of any business. And if you can deliver this for a business, then you can name your price. So that's about 3/4 of an hour, which I said I would speak about team coaching. So I'd like to open now for anyone with any comments, any questions. If you have a functioning microphone, then Alexandro can open that for you if you raise your hand, or you can type questions in and Alexandro will read them to me. So as I went through that pretty quickly and covering some important ideas, I'd be interested in what comments or questions you have in response to that.
Many thanks, Joseph. So yes, we have two ways. If you raise your hand, I open the microphone, or if you write in English or Spanish your questions, I could read and translate. So whatever is easier for you. So Joseph, we have the first question here from Zoraida. Hello, what do you think is the hardest part of creating a high performance team?
I hesitate to pin down anything, because the whole thing's a process. It's like saying, what's the most important mile between getting from your house to your work? Well, they're all important. You know, you've got to go through every one of them, otherwise you don't reach your work from your house. Some of them may be more tricky to negotiate than others. I would say in that sense, the first part of the first team coaching session, where you're getting to know the team, that can be tricky. And the other part that can be tricky is the dealing with the conflicts. So those would be the tricky parts of actually the journey on the way to a high-performing team.
Indeed. And then we go to another question from Ricardo. Ricardo is saying that you mentioned that between different teams we have unstable membership and stable memberships. However, under those unstable ones, how do you deal with things like loyalty with the business or activities, lack of knowledge or in the organization, etc.?
Well, the unstable teams come together for a certain purpose, and it's still important for the coach to make sure that that purpose is clear, the values are clear, and people work together. If you take the air crew, you know, the cabin crew as the example, now they have a very important similar ethos, which is, first of all, safety. That is their paramount value, and then customer service. So they need to do that. Now, in that sense, they treat each other equally. It doesn't matter that their friend isn't there for the next flight. They all feel themselves members of a team, and they all work together with whoever else is a member of the team in order to produce a certain result, which in this particular case is a safe, comfortable flight. So the sorts of things in an unstable team, the same principles apply of team coaching, they just have to be done in a slightly different way. I think that's the simplest answer to that. And of course, you know, the particular example of an unstable team within a business, you would need to know in more detail in order to see exactly how to deal with the sorts of issues that it throws up.
Thanks, Joseph.
Oh, sorry, just one more thing, Alexandra, I just forgot, but I think it's important about the question.
Yep.
These sorts of unstable teams will have an operational manual. In other words, the knowledge will be written down somewhere, and it will be added to, and it will be something that everybody needs to know, so that the knowledge is there, and it's going to be outside the team in a very concrete way because the team is unstable.
Great. Then there is another question from Victor saying, what if things go wrong? Could you tell us a personal experience when a team didn't want to be coached?
I can't tell you a personal experience because I've never had one. It's possible. I mean, I have a friend who was in a position like that, and the situation was that he was paid to coach this team. It was quite a good team. It was high performing at the time. And he came in one morning, and this team had been told the night before that they were going to be let go, that they were redundant, that they had to find another job. So they were very angry and very upset and very emotional. And the last thing they wanted was coaching, you know, for the business goals. It really wasn't very important anymore. Well, you know, in that sense, what my friend did was what you would do as a coach. You have to accept reality. You can't say, well, come on, snap out of it. Let's let's go back to our goal, because it's not going to happen. So you listen. You listen. You let people give out their feelings. You listen to people. You don't try to offer solutions at all. and you let them come to a kind of equilibrium where the emotions are there out in the open, people have calmed down a little bit. And then you ask, well, what shall we do? How can we make the best use of the time that we have available? And that would be my question if I ever did come across a team. You know, if I walked into a room and there was a team all sitting on the chair leaning back with their arms folded, saying, okay, then come and coach me. I think that would be one of the first questions I'd asked. It's like, well, I've been asked to coach you. I'm sure your life isn't perfect. How can I help you, and what's the most useful way that we can use this time together?
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Joseph. We are receiving a lot of questions, so many thanks for your interest and interaction, by the way. Thanks for sending those. So the next one, it's from Alva. Joseph, which is the best way to identify the stages, the developmental stages for a team?
It's complicated. It is complicated. You can say that at the beginning, it's always going to be that first stage of getting to know each other, and there are certain things that you need to do, like establish the goals and the values. Once those are established and agreed, then you're into another stage, and that stage can last some time. In fact, with some teams, you just stay in that stage. They don't go high performing. Maybe they don't go conflict either, because another stage is conflict. You're always going to get some conflict with teams, and that's fine. You just need to be able to deal with it in the most productive way. And then with a high-performing team, it's easy. They do the work themselves. You could kind of sit back and let them get on with it and just nudge them occasionally to keep them on track sometimes. So there's a certain ease and flow about that you can feel. But it's hard to give specific and concrete signs and signals about the stages of a team.
Thanks, Joseph. So we go to another one. That it's from Viviana. She's asking, what is that true that a team should have at least one, between quotes, different member, or I don't know how to translate to English, detonating member to to get to the team a constant and dynamic change?
It depends on the detonator. I think you need people who are different, but if you get people who are too different and don't know how to handle the differences, then you can get some explosions. And there's no guarantee, of course, that people will be able to handle their emotions. And however good a team coach might be, there may be some people who just can't stand each other and they don't want to be in the same team, in which case one needs to be moved. But I don't think you need a detonator particularly. I think you just need good diversity, and good diversity will keep the sparks going without the fire flaring up.
Great. So another, I'm kind of following your metaphor. I'm bombing you with questions. So just let me know, and I will regulate that. But we have a lot of them. This is why I'm going through them.
Okay. Well, I'll do as many as I can.
Great. So we have one from Benjamin. He's asking, how can we avoid the comment, "This guy does not know about our business," for a team coach?
Do you want to avoid the comment?
Yeah.
I mean, I would question that you would want to avoid the comment. I have a certain way of looking at coaching, which is as follows. I think that a coach needs to know how business works. They need to be credible in a business, but they don't need to know exactly how that business works. I mean, for example, I've done a lot of coaching inside banks and financial institutions. I do not know how financial institutions and banks work. I mean, I know generally speaking how they work, but all of the very complexity of the technology and the financial instruments that they have, I don't know that. And as a coach, I'm not being paid to know that, and there's no reason why I should. I am being paid to help the team do the best they can in the business, and it's the team that needs to be the experts in the business, not me. And that's the same with individual coaching as well. So I think that a good team coach, just like a good individual coach, needs two things. They need business credibility. They need to know how business works, but not necessarily that specific business. And they need beginner's mind, because if they are from the same business, they will have certain ways of thinking, they will have certain ideas that they won't question, and they may not be as effective a coach as someone who doesn't know that business well from the inside. Because if you know anything well from the inside, you've gone through it, there are certain circuits that you just don't think of anymore. And it may be that these circuits are exactly what's going wrong in the business. So beginner's mind is really important. That's why I wouldn't want to avoid that comment. I don't think that's bad at all, and I would answer anyone who challenged me with that in exactly the way that I answered that question.
Thanks, Joseph. We have another question then from Rodrigo. That he's asking, it seems that your approach is more focused on the team, the process, the goals, while there are others that approaches that pay deeper attention to individuals' language, communication one-to-one. What does your experience say about that?
Well, communication one-to-one, I mean, obviously that takes place when you're coaching an individual, so individual coaching. Of course, a team coach is going to pay attention to body language and non-verbal behavior and what's called paralanguage, which is all the voice tones and pauses and vocal styles that people have, as well as the words, because the paralanguage and the words go together. You can't separate one without the other. So, of course, they pay attention to the words, and of course they listen to the words and they frame questions very carefully using words. So I wouldn't say that that the importance of words and listening to language is any the less in team coaching. It's just different, and you sometimes have to keep track of multiple people saying all sorts of different things at much the same time, which you wouldn't have to in an individual. So team coaching, it's just bigger. You're dealing with more people, so you're tracking a lot more. So you need to be very careful what you do track.
Thanks, Joseph, again. And we have then another question from Victor. What if teams have very different jobs inside the same organization and believe their role is more important? For example, computer engineers who think the application they develop is more important than the salesman job of going out and get people to buy it, and vice versa.
Well, that's not the coach's job. That's the consultant's job and the organization's job. If I was working with a group of IT specialists, I would help them to produce the best possible technological solution that they could. Now, what happens to it after that isn't their business. It goes to the sales or whatever. So in that sense, it doesn't matter what they think of sales at all. Now, if I was trying to coach a sales team and an IT team in the same room, then that would be a problem. But there's no reason why any business would do that. So I've not come across that. So keep it simple. There are some problems that they aren't your problem. And it's really important to be clear about that. There are some problems that will be your problem as a coach, team coach, and there are some problems that are not your problem as a team coach. And if they crop up, you just go along to the organizational head or the HR that hired you and say, excuse me, you need to fix this. And then you hand it on, and that's it.
Perfectly clear. So we are going towards the last questions, so we keep some kind of the time frame. So Marianela is asking, which are specific techniques for handle team coaching? Which techniques are specific for team coaching?
I don't know how to answer that question because it's too broad. Because techniques is very general and specific is very specific. And if you put the two together, I don't know how to answer that. I think you need to be a bit more specific about your question, Marinella.
Okay, Marinella. So if you want to reframe the question, with pleasure we read it again. Okay. Another question from Romina. What type of activities supports to keep the passion and enthusiasm in a team to create a high performance team? What kind of activities supports that?
Well, there's all sorts of activities, and it's something we go into in quite detail in the course. It's around creativity. Various ways of stimulating creativity, various sorts of activities. I mean, they used to be, it was a fad, it's not so much now, but they used to send out teams hiking together or climbing mountains together or abseiling together or something like that. It's a little bit extreme to a way to get teams to bond, but and that's also, of course, taking it out of the business. But there are many ways, many kind of shared games, many kind of shared activities, many ways of stimulating individual creativity inside teams. And the specific one that you would use would depend on the team and the people and what they were doing and how it was happening. But there's plenty of stuff you can do.
Great, Joseph. So another question from Meliton. He's asking, which ones are the most important ingredients for a teamwork? A teamwork.
Well, it's interesting. People have different ideas about this. I would say that in order to be you need to be a good team member. So you need to be able to work well with people, but you also need your own independence. So it's a kind of balance between being able to work with other people, but also having your own point of view and not simply deferring to other people or losing yourself in the team. You want people who have their own ideas, who want to share their own ideas, but do it in a spirit of cooperation and collaboration to get a good solution. They're not trying to prove anybody wrong. They're not trying to win an argument. They don't think necessarily they're right, but they put their point of view forward as a way of everybody coming to the best possible result. So something like that.
Great, Joseph. So if you agree, we go for the last question now.
Okay.
And it's from Ignacio. It's saying, is it that team coaching is best than personal coaching, or how they are complemented?
Well, they're different, and it depends on the need of the organization. You know, in the end, whether it's individual coaching or team coaching in an organization, it's got to serve what the organization wants. You know, no CEO is going to sign off on team coaching or individual coaching just because somebody thinks it's a good idea. It has to be linked with measurable results. So depending on what measurable results you may want team coaching or you may want individual coaching. If an executive, needs to perform better, then individual coaching. If a team needs to perform better, then team coaching, or maybe a mixture of both. Plenty of team coaches, I do myself, will have individual coaching sessions with each member of the team, as well as taking them in team coaching sessions. So it's not about which is best, it's about which one is appropriate for the organizational needs which you're called in to do. And you may be called in to give individual coaching and you may think team coaching would be better. And it may be vice versa. So always be responsive to the organization's need.
Many thanks, Joseph. So we want to thank again for all the questions you sent during this webinar. There were a lot, so many thanks for this. And I leave you, Joseph, with the final thoughts to close this webinar then.
Final thoughts. I think anyone who's been in a really good team, and I'm sure that most, if not all of you, have had an experience of working together with a number of other people, and it's just amazing. It flows. You get a result that you never believed was possible, and you come back afterwards like a dream and you go, how did that happen? It's a similar sort of thing in sport. You're in a football team and you just play brilliantly. Everybody plays brilliantly all at the same time, and you have no idea how that happens. And that, if you can make that kind of experience for people in a team as a team coach, then this is amazing, and it's also a great experience for you too. So that would be final thought. Very rewarding.
Many thanks, Joseph. Thanks again for everyone. And well, we are going to send you a link to watch the recording. So please wait for the link in next days. This will be available. And well, if you are interested on taking or knowing more about this, we are going to send you also the information about the team coaching happening in Santiago de Chile with Joseph in August. So this is all by now, with a big thanks, and looking forward to meet you again in upcoming webinars. Thanks.
Great. Thank you all very much. Thank you for your attention and your interaction.
Great.